All right, man, CouchPotatoGM.com is the website. Couch Potato General Manager is the YouTube channel. You know it because you're on it. We're here to discuss hashtags Steel Curtain.
Steeler Nation.
Oh, sorry.
Say it again. Respect them, man.
Say it again.
Steeler Nation.
Hashtag Steeler Nation. We're here to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers NFL 2019 Draft Recap. They had I don't even know what pick y'all had. They had the 20th pick. Mm-hmm. The 20th pick, and you traded up
10 spots.
to the 10th pick. 10 spots. If you do your math right, simple math. Mm-hmm. Some of us struggle with that. It's okay. We got you.
Mm-hmm. You know, we got that new math out there.
They do got a new math.
Yeah.
And you got to do diet. Okay, we ain't gonna, don't get me upset, bro. Yo, this is a player that they drafted that I thought, given the opportunity, which obviously I didn't think he was gonna fall to 20, maybe like if he falls like to 15,
you were thinking the
14,
teens.
somewhere. If he happens to pass the Bengals in some sort of way, which would be foolish by them, that they would trade up and grab him. Well, they did something even better. They said, you know what, we're putting our chips in the middle, and here we go again. They got a baller in Devin Bush, Michigan linebacker.
Yeah, man, that void of Ryan Shazier, you know, that showed up big last season, showed up big the season before, the playoffs.
The minute he was gone.
The minute he was gone, man.
Yeah.
So putting Devin Bush in the middle of that Steelers defense, this guy is a heat-seeking missile, not afraid of the smoke, sideline to sideline linebacker. He just brings swag to this football team also, man. This guy is my linebacker one, man. And, you know, I just got so much positive things to say about this guy, man.
You sound like you ran out of things to say right now.
Yeah,
you want to keep going? You want to get to the notes?
Yeah, man. Proficient blitzer, gets to the quarterback quickly, excellent in zone coverage.
Yep.
You know, some people was like, oh, he might be too small or too slow to play weak side linebacker, but he disproved that in the combine, ran a 4.4 40.
Just
obliterated.
Sparkies just fell in love at that point.
You know, because they were knocking him at first, but you know, once they seen that 4.4, he's the guy again, man.
Stack and shed linebacker, a guy that this team is sorely needed, like you said, the leader, a guy who's going to come in and command the huddle day one. It's just been the missing piece in the Steelers defense, man. You know, you go back and you think, okay, well, who's that guy? I don't know. We just know that things have been in disarray, you know, and this is a guy who's going to change the fortunes of that defense.
Injuries have detracted, particularly in the front seven. Injuries have been a problem. Obviously, Shazier, you know, in terms of the neck injury, you know, he's actually running, working out.
Yeah,
and everything.
he was dancing.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
But
Headley, you talked about it, you know, leading up to the draft, that there was a potential of two linebackers, off the ball linebackers, going really early in this draft, and you know, historically, you generally don't see that very often. I mean, unless you Patrick Willis.
Yep.
Luke Kuechly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You generally don't see that very often. But as the league changes, and Bush, the Devins, Bush and White, they're unique athletes. They're unique athletes in terms of what they can do sideline to sideline. He's seeking missile, and their ability to affect the passer, I think, is what kind of put them over the top. Yeah. In addition to their athletic testing, kind of put them over the top. My thought process throughout the entire offseason for Pittsburgh, despite all of the stuff that's happened on the other side of the ball, is the fact that if Pittsburgh wants to be successful, they got to play better defense. I've talked about it before, and I'll say it again. They got to stop blowing coverages. Guys got to be where they're supposed to be. There's a lot of guys just not in place. Not necessarily not making a play, being there and just being the other guy being better than you. Guys are just not doing their job. And Bush comes from a disciplined defense where he understands his keys, all right? He can diagnose. Again, we talked about his athleticism, being able to get sideline to sideline, but he's going to be where he needs to be, and that's exactly what they need in the middle of that defense.
In the third round, the 66th pick overall, the Steelers selected Diontae Johnson, wide receiver out of Toledo.
He has easy speed to me. On tape, you know, he ran a 4.5 at the combine, but on tape he runs a lot faster. It's easy speed. He can stack the cornerbacks easily. He uses his hands really well at the moment of truth to kind of create a little separation. Nice run after the catch ability. I like his footwork. He's just inexperienced as a route runner. He played quarterback in college, so he's new to the position at wide receiver. I think this guy's an enticing prospect that could be a quality receiver. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, I thought it was a little bit early for Diontae Johnson with the other receivers that was on the draft board.
Yeah.
But the Steelers have drafted receivers consistently well throughout their history, Emmanuel Sanders, Antonio Brown, Mike Wallace. So I'm not going to question the Steelers on wide receivers.
You don't want to question it. I think it's an easier transition, particularly if the guy has a requisite athleticism. I think that's an easier transition than maybe running back to receiver, where, you know, quarterback, you know, Julian Edelman became a receiver because he understands, you know, where the receivers are supposed to be, how to attack the zone. You know what I mean? He has a feel for it from that perspective, and he has a requisite athleticism. So when we saw this happen with San Francisco in terms of them going to go grab Jalen Hurd, and Jalen Hurd is quite the athlete himself, it was also considered a bit of a reach. And Hurd is probably a better athlete, but to me, from my perspective, I think this guy, you know, maybe it doesn't have the same level of opportunity, but it may be a bit of an easier transition for him going from the collegiate level to the NFL level after being a quarterback and then ultimately playing receiver.
With the second, third round pick, the 83rd pick overall, they selected Justin Layne, cornerback out of Michigan State. When I went to watch the tape, I got the vibe of Rocky Sin. Man-to-man corner, a guy who wants to put his hands on the receiver at all times. 6'2", 190-something pounds, a former receiver, slid over to cornerback. I mean, sometimes the best cornerbacks are former receivers.
Yeah,
so
you got that ball skills.
Yeah.
You know, pretty much, man. I love Justin Lane's intensity. You know, he just fits the Steelers. Like, you know, the Steelers mold, the physical, intense guys, man. He also has really good instincts in zone. He's long, he has good length. And if he gets you to the sideline, it's over because of that length, man. His length is just ridiculous. He pins to the sideline. He bats down a lot of passes. And he could be a starter quickly at this level because, you know, Artie Burns. Joe Hayden's getting a little older. Joe Hayden's starting, but he's getting a little older. So
it's expensive too. You
know, Justin Lane could get on the field pretty quickly for the Steelers.
They brought in Steven Nelson, but, you know, he's been up and down. He's been up and down, to say the least. I think this is an interesting pick, and it goes back to my original point about the defense. This defense has to be substantially better than it's been over the last few seasons. Even when Pittsburgh was in the thick of things in the playoffs, they have to be substantially better, and guys have to be where they're supposed to be, and when they're in position to make a play, make the damn play. You understand what I'm saying? You know, we talked about Artie Burns. We've talked about him, you know, ad nauseum. Whenever we talk about the Steelers, we talk about Artie Burns. Artie Burns has ability, but his confidence is shot. His confidence is shot. He might need a whole new, place to play. He might need a fresh start. You know, so you're not sure what you're getting from that. In last season, you invested a first-round pick in Terrell Edmonds, which we thought, okay, from a Sparky standpoint, okay, I get it. But in terms of really having a feel for the position, may have been a bit of a reach. Those guys have to really, you know, that learning curve as you go from the collegiate level to the NFL level, they're going to have to speed that whole thing up and really get sound because, listen, it's difficult to get off the field in today's game. You know what I mean? The offense has to be incredibly inept. The offensive play call has to be inept in order to get, you know, those routine 3 and outs, unless you are beating up that opposition, unless you are better technically, more physically, you're more intelligent than the guys across from you because they know where they're going. You understand what I'm saying? They know where they're going. If you don't know where you're supposed to be defensively, then it's 6 points.
In the fourth round, the 122nd pick, we have Benny Snell Jr., Kentucky running back. You know, listen, I was trying to get into it too quickly. You know, I thought this guy was going to be a world beater. You know, he was having a pretty good season, and I don't know what happened. He just kind of pumped the brakes, hit the brakes at a certain point during the season. But watching his tape, this is a Steeler. It's a prototypical Steeler when you talk about his mindset, his run style. I mean, blue collar, just look up the word blue collar. That's kind of it. Downhill, hard-nosed runner, you know? So, and then you pair that with a James Conner, you know, because Lev Bell's no longer there. You know, you can't give James Conner 200, 300 carries every season. There's got to be a guy who can spell him, who's kind of in a similar mold. Maybe doesn't have all the physical traits as a James Conner, but is a guy who can just take some of the carries away and do still some of the similar things that you want from the running back position.
Yeah, man, I think you hit the nail on the head. He's a tough, physical inside runner. He's very decisive. He finds the holes quickly. He punishes defenders. He could take a toll on the defense with his running style. So Connor has a punishing style, just like Benny Snell, but that style of running lends yourself to injury. So if Connor goes down, I think Benny Snell could be a starter paired with Jalen Samuels, and the Steelers would be just fine.
Yeah, the thing about Benny Snell and all the picks that we've mentioned thus far is the mentality, as you've mentioned.
Yep.
The character, the football character. Again, we've talked about it. We're not going to beat a dead horse, but certainly a lot of talent exited stage left. And it was right or wrong. We're not going to debate that because we're of the mindset that go get your money.
Yeah.
This is a finite profession. Go get your money. But the mentality these guys have, Bush, Layne, Snell, they were part of changing or affecting the culture in a very positive way. You understand? For their respective teams. They talk about Benny Snell, and I actually heard Mike Tomlin talk about it when he was interviewed during the draft process. The fact that, the coaches said, this is the guy that kind of spurred the whole shift. Kentucky's obviously a basketball school, but if you look up and down that roster, and you start looking across the NFL and looking at rosters, a lot of Kentucky players over the last few seasons coming out, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, but certainly they've kind of changed the image with respect to that school, and they said Benny Snell was at the center of that. So bringing in more of those guys to really cultivate the culture that they're trying to implement, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
In the 5th round, the 141st pick, the Steelers selected tight end out of Michigan, Mr. Zach Gentry.
Yeah, man. This was the first Steeler pick where, didn't really like the pick, man. I thought this was a reach.
Bro, but he's 6'8", though, bro.
Oh, he's 6'8".
Yeah, he's big.
Okay. I guess he's the Jesse James replacement.
He can't really get off the line. He's not a mover.
His hands are a little inconsistent.
So, I mean...
Nothing positive to say about the guy? Other than he's
6'8".
6'8".
All right.
He's a target. Catch radius. Ben can get it to him. Essentially, how we feel about this pick, it's a 5th round pick, but maybe they could have went somewhere else. But, if they have we can only assume they have a plan for him.
Maybe Steelers Nation can help us out, man. Like, Gentry, man, let us know what you guys think of this guy and how he fits with your team.
With their first 6th round picks, the Steelers do have 3 6th round picks. The 175th pick overall. Can't talk, y'all. They selected Sutton Smith, outside linebacker out of Northern Illinois, and he's super undersized. Mm-hmm. And I have a question about this pick and the pick after the next pick, because both of those guys are extremely small and undersized, and I'm trying to figure where they fit in this defense. What are we doing? I understand there's a possibility they could play. Obviously, they're going to play special teams, but we talking like super tweeners, guys who get bullied, guys who get pushed around, but they have speed, they're elusive. So I'm just trying to figure out: are we setting them up? Are we setting them up for success in a package, down and distance type of thing? Like, what are we doing? Because I'm not sure. Unless we're talking about throwing on 10, 15 pounds, and then, I don't know what that player would look like.
It might be more of a long-term approach with those guys. Particularly, you're not even certain if these guys are going to make the roster at this pick. But certainly, it may be more of, we see something in this guy. We're going to bring him into our program, develop him. That's generally what the Steelers do, is they draft and develop. So,
that's true.
It's probably that thought process because I understand. Maybe on a different team, it's okay. We have a role. We have a specific role that we want to play. The Steelers haven't necessarily approached things like that historically. That may change, but generally, it's a draft and develop long-term, 2-3 years from now thought process.
Yeah, like you said, man, special teams outside. I think he's a situational pass rusher. A lot of swag. He got a lot of swag, and he has a high-end production. So, like you said, maybe the Steelers thinking they could develop this guy into a pass rush off the edge. 192nd
pick overall, they selected. They went to Roll Tide. They went to Bama, and they got Isaiah Buggs, defensive tackle. He's 6'3", 306.
Buggs obviously comes from that long line of Alabama defensive linemen. It wasn't necessarily an every down player. Yeah. Was part of a rotation, and that's exactly what he's entering here. Sure. You already kind of have your stalwarts in place with Hargrave, Heyward, Tuitt, those guys. Buggs can come in, upside obviously, talent there, but so many so many talented players along that Alabama defensive front.
Yeah.
You don't always get to see everything. So at this point in the draft, it makes sense. It makes sense. He understands, has played in an odd man front.
Yep.
Is a little versatile, can play the tackle position and the even man front, the 5 technique, and an odd man front. So you can see what kind of sticks here. He might surprise. Not unlike Deshaun Hand. I think, from our perspective, we weren't necessarily sold on him out the gate, but he really impressed last year. So obviously this is a bit of a later pick, but I think Bugs has an opportunity to make this roster in terms of being a part of that defensive line rotation.
All right, with their last 6th-round pick, it's a guy I spoke about earlier, 207th pick. His name is Ulysses S. Grant. No, I'm just kidding. Ulysses Gilbert III, out of Akron, inside linebacker. He was 233. He might be 240-something now, but I mean,
that's what they are now.
233?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
We built for speed these days, man. Passing league, we built for speed.
Yeah, this guy, he got some good instincts in the run game. Developmental prospect. The Steelers has had an issue for a couple seasons without Ryan Shazier. They add Devin Bush. They brought in Mark Barron. So it's another guy in that inside linebacker rotation.
Yeah, that's a lot of tweeners.
Yeah, I agree. But in this league where we're talking about matchups, and of course, again, the Steelers organization, they tend to think long term with players. You know what I mean? They're drafting replacements potentially. At this juncture, we don't know for certain. With that being said, they've had that issue. Obviously, they've had the Shazier injury most recently. All right, we think Bush steps in, no brainer. We're good to go from that perspective. Vince Williams has been the guy opposite that, but they've struggled in terms of keeping 2 stalwarts at the inside linebackers healthy. Now they've created some depth for themselves.
All right, in the 7th round, with the last pick, 219 pick overall, the Steelers selected Derwin Gray, offensive tackle out of Maryland. And, the Steelers, for how many years, they've had great offensive line. They've been top 5 for I don't know how many years. And so, you got to continue to replenish that.
Big physical guy, has a little bit of movement talent to him. You lost Marcus Gilbert to the Arizona Cardinals. You like what you've seen out of Matt Fowler last season. So just more depth along the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line. A very good offensive line, but just more depth. Another guy that the Steelers could develop.
And you go back to, like you just said, development. You go back to that's what they do. Draft a guy in the 7th round, take a flyer on him, and then ends up being a guy who's probably going to start. They're going to trade another guy away. Who knows? And that'll be a starter come down the line. So
there's not a whole lot of plug and play these days. You know what I mean? We've talked about it kind of relatively extensively as it pertains to the watering down of offensive line play at the collegiate level, and then you expect these guys to be able to come in the NFL and perform. Where now technique, you're not just better because you're bigger and stronger than the other guy. Now it really comes down to technique because everybody's a little bit closer. So giving your offensive linemen, those draftees, a little time to develop can go a long way in terms of their success long term.
Yeah. The Steelers got it playing. There's a couple of teams in the league that do the same thing. So yeah. But Steeler Nation, that's it. Not hashtag Steel Curtain. Steeler Nation. Let us know how you feel about your draft. Was Devin Bush a surprise to you? Going up 10, that's 10 spots, man. Let us know in the comment section. Like, subscribe.
Layne is in the building.